Good morning, and I wanted to say happy Easter Monday. So it's Easter Monday, and I know in some countries they actually celebrate it. And I was reading up this morning, and it actually said that at the White House they do egg rolling celebrations on Easter Monday, which I thought was kind of interesting. I thought about a couple of days ago that when I made this group, I was like so excited. I thought, oh, I'm going to get these people together and they're just going to like love on each other and they're going to help each other and support each other. And then I realized some of you guys don't even have a clue who I am. And so I thought, maybe I should come on here and give you a little bit of history about who I am and what I'm doing and why I ended up here. And so I do a lot of entrepreneurial study, and sometimes it gets overwhelming, and it's like you need to do all of this stuff. And I thought, what if I just come in here and just like let you know who I am? And there's a story. I did some speaker training like around November, December, and so there's a story they tell you to know to craft this story, and the beginning story that I started with was not the one that I ended up telling. And I asked God, I said, okay, God, what story do you want me to tell to help people understand why I do what I do? And so he told me immediately this picture came to my head, my dad sitting on the couch in the living room. And I'd never told that story publicly before, ever, ever, ever. And so I thought, okay. And so I took that story and I wrapped it up into this package that they wanted me to use, and I told it in public for the first time. I mean, I don't think I'd ever told anybody that story, but I told the public on stage for the first time in December, I believe it was, down in San Diego. And the impact was really great. I thought, okay, I guess God knows what He's doing. So the story starts like this, because I was about 8 years old, and I heard my mom call me into the living room, and I figured I was probably in trouble for something. And so I walked down, and there's like the old wall heater, and my mom is standing there right by the doorway of the living room, and I could see my dad on the couch behind the newspaper. And she looked down at me and she said, "Your brother told me that your dad's been touching you. Is that true?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she looked at my dad and she said, "Is that true?" And he never looked up from the newspaper, like ever. And he just said, "I don't know what she's talking about." And she looked down at me and we had this conversation. But one time when she addressed him, he said, "I don't recall what she's talking about." And I hooked on that word and I said, "What do you mean you don't?" And I actually got angry and started yelling, which is something like you would never do to my parents because you'd like get your face slapped off. And I said, "It happens every day. It happens. It just happened yesterday. It happens all the time." But he never looked up from the newspaper and never engaged. And eventually the conversation ended. And the impact of his lie was probably, I mean, I don't want to minimize this, but it was probably more profound than the impact of what he was doing to me. So the fact that he lied about it and that my mom believed him, um, but it was never talked about again. And so I learned two things, that when I have the guts to really step up and stand up for myself and really speak the truth, it really didn't matter. Subsequently, that meant that I don't matter. And so I learned how to just be who anybody wanted me to be, because if I don't matter, apparently what you want matters. And so I became a really good follower, and I could just be whoever you want me to be. And so um, it doesn't surprise anybody that I became a marriage and family therapist and a pastor. The years of damage that the situation caused was profound in my life, and as the years went by, I actually became addicted to alcohol. I was a very, very large teenage alcoholic, and halfway through my high school years, I started getting involved in drugs and sexual promiscuity, and eventually the police showed up at my door. And I never really told anybody honestly what had happened to me. My high school friends, I just never had anybody come. I had one friend one time spend the night in my house once, and that was it. And I would tell my girlfriends, I'd ask them, "Did you ever really know what happened?" They said, "No, we knew that there was something going on. You told us to stay away from your dad, but you never said why." But when the police showed up at my door and I told them the truth, uh, it was like the first time I got to actually tell some other person the truth of what had happened. And And that really was a harrowing experience, simply because my dad had actually called me, and actually came into the house and told me that the police had showed up at his work and that they were going to arrest him because he had molested somebody in the church. And then after, and that night I told him that I hated him. And it was like all this like anger came out for the first time. It was really strange. And the next night, I remember clearly, it was Halloween, because I'm pregnant with my second child. I'm handing candy out at the front door with my mom on the phone calling me a liar. I mean, this was very burned in my mind moment. And so when the police showed up, it was like just wanting to vent all of that. So I got that opportunity. However, when my dad went to jail, he went to a white collar jail because he was a professional. So he got to go to jail during the week and came home on the weekend. So he would still show up at churches, though nothing would happen. And so sadly, at the time, we were all still attending the same church. And I had to go to the pastor and tell him, hey, did you know that my dad actually got convicted? And he's like, no, he was a new pastor on a new assignment. And so he ended up removing my dad from the church board and the church. My dad was on the church board. He was teaching Sunday school. My parents were very, very involved in church. And mind you, these people adopted me. So I was put up for adoption at birth. So very, very convoluted history. And so after that, I went to my pastor. And I said, I think I might need some counseling. And he's like, okay, we'll make a list of what you want to get out of counseling. And so I went home and I made this little list of 10 items. And it was just this little, I remember it was just this little scrap of paper, and it said better relationship with my brothers, better relationship with my parents. And I don't remember what else was on the list, but he read it down and he says, okay, where do you want to start? And I said, well, my relationship with God. And I kid you not, it wasn't on the list. I didn't think about it ahead of time. I had no inclination whatsoever to go to the church and talk to the pastor about my spiritual condition, none whatsoever. And I was kind of surprised that those words came out of my mouth. So it's kind of like God said, okay, this day. But the pastor responded, he says, well, where is your relationship with God? And I'm like, I don't know. And he says, well, did you ever ask Jesus into your heart? And I said, well, when I was 5 during VBS, I went to the altar because my brother made me. And I cried, and the guy that came to pray with me got mad because I wouldn't stop crying. And the pastor goes, is that it? And I'm like, yeah. And we went, and he goes, well, we can fix that. And we went down to the altar and prayed out of his office, down to the sanctuary, down to the altar and prayed, just simple sinner's prayer. And the most thing I remember about that incident was as I was leaving that day, I'm standing at the old wooden doors, and they had those little squares of colored glass with the very top ones were clear, and I could see out. And it was the main thoroughfare in Sacramento, California. And he said, what are you thinking? And I just said, I don't want to go out there. And yet dynamically that changed my day. The next day, so that was on a Tuesday, next day was Wednesday, and I was a good church goer. I'd go on Wednesday nights all the time, Sunday morning, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, all the time. And I walked up to the pastor and I said, what would you do if I told you I wanted to be a missionary? And he looked at me and he said, don't sell your house. Everybody says that. And he turned around and walked away. And that became a long history of people telling me the ministry is horrible, the ministry is terrible, you're going to hate it. If you could do anything else, go do it. And I never really felt like anybody who was a superior to me actually said, hey, let me help you do this. I had somebody who was a friend, and I don't even remember how I met them, but he was a pastor and his wife, and they actually really encouraged me, but they were never really my pastor. I mean, they were never a superior to me that actually could encourage me during that time. And so subsequently, I ended up divorced, which meant it would never happen. And then, so I went into studying marriage and family therapy. Now, in between there, I found out that I really needed therapy of my own and got some professional help. I was actually hospitalized 5 times for depression in 1 year. So I was really, really jacked up. And the things that I learned while I was hospitalized was just phenomenal. And I kept thinking, why didn't anybody tell me this thing and tell me these things? There was so many basic things that I wish somebody would have told me. And so not only was it, how come nobody ever asked me about my spirituality? Well, I had been in church I was 23 when I got saved. For 23 years, I was in church all the time, and nobody ever asked me, where's your relationship with God? And then there were all these things that I found out in the mental health world. It's like, if I had just known that, I could have fixed this and this and this. And I remember sitting in the hospital, leaning up against the door when my psychiatrist was reading his notes into his little machine. And I'd lean at the door and I would listen to what he was saying. And then I would study about what he was saying, because I thought, I need to get help. I want to overcome this. And so years later, after I go through all this therapy and I go through all this training, and then I actually go through the ordination process because some of those restrictions had changed. And then I performed therapy for 20 years. So lots of information, lots of experience. And I really desperately wanted to give this information to people. And I thought, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for people to get the information that they need to get help when they need it? And I would tell people, I want to make a way where this is easier and faster. And so I actually condensed it into a book, and I made it into a journal style. And I tell people, you can pay me $200 an hour, or you can get 17 years for $20. And it's your choice. And so then I made an e-course, and I just started thinking, okay, how do I help people get the information that they need that's more succinct about their issues than having to go and sit with this whole therapy process that can take forever. And as I was going through all of this, some of my clients would get stuck. I mean, they would genuinely want to work, and they would work really hard, and they would get stuck. And so one day I was sitting on my couch, and I'm like, why are they getting stuck? And I was particularly thinking about this one kid with gender identity issues. And I was thinking, man, why do they want to over-identify with that? And I'm like, what is the problem? And I heard two words: identity abuse. And I thought, what is that? Because personally, I would have never put those two words together. So there's physical abuse and sexual abuse, but identity, I would have never taken the kind of, there are two different realms. So one is very physical, practical, and the other one is very ethereal. And but I spent a couple of days, because I tell people I think really fast. I can think about something for about 5 minutes and kind of wrap my mind around the basic concepts. But I spent 2 days by myself thinking, what would have happened to me? What's the outplay if my identity, who I am, got abused? So it actually becomes self-perception. When your self-perception is abused, the way you think about yourself and respond to yourself and react to the world will be misaligned from the truth. And it started, and I used to say it explains Hitler, and I decided not to use that anymore because I didn't want to minimize what Hitler had done. But if you look at Hitler's history and what had happened to him, and then the outplay of that, but what I realized is it explains every type of non-organic mental health, emotional health issue. I should say emotional health issue. And so when you believe lies about yourself, it will be extremely hard for you to believe truth if those lies are ingrained. And so what I realized is that my identity was abused before I was aware I had an identity. I was so young that I was receiving all this information before I was even aware that I had an identity. I was not old enough or mature enough to be able to understand that there's possibly somebody lying to me, that I'm receiving information that's not true about myself. And so that following Tuesday, after I had this revelation, I went to church where I was working in staff meeting, and I'm like, hey, you guys, I got to share this with you. And I was just writing diagrams all over the whiteboard. I'm like, do you realize that when your identity, that who God says you are, is damaged by somebody or something, and you start believing lies, that it can impact everything. It can bring on addictions, it can bring on bad habits, and bring on emotional reactivity, so many things. And I actually had one of my coworkers text me and say thank you, because they had started believing things about themselves and about their call that was really brought on by lies. Now, we know who the father of lies is. We know who the father of lies is. And if we don't recognize that, then we will think that we're bad, that we have bad thoughts. These thoughts are mine, and I'm bad because I'm thinking bad things. And we dismiss the fact that the enemy is constantly trying to get us to believe things that aren't true. And so by the time I got done writing that first book, I really thought, man, if I'd have written a book about the way that Satan works, I think it would have been more powerful. So the first one is very practical on how to cope with certain things and how to think well and how to think accurately and how to see God accurately and that sort of thing. The next book, I have tried umpteen times, but the enemy doesn't want to be exposed, to get it going. And I thought, to have true stories of when did you realize that the enemy is real, and how do we have those conversations? Um, and so I took all of this and after the book, and I made a course called Identity Abuse Busters, and I had done it as a live course, like a group at the church that I was at, and then I used it as an online course, and I use it for my coaching as well, to just walk people through the lies that they believe and how to strengthen themselves emotionally and to grow emotionally mature as a Christian. And so my whole hope is to help people grow more emotionally mature as a Christian, to learn how to believe what is true, and then be able to stand up for what you know, to own your message, to own your call, and then to walk every day in the reality of that. And so the course has three overarching themes that if you grasp these things and you apply them regularly, they will they'll impact not only you and the way that you walk every day, but then you'll have the tools that you can actually help others with, which is really my hope, is that the message will be spread. So the first one is that you do have an identity that's designed by God, that's valuable and can be discovered. So a lot of people go, I don't know my purpose, and I don't know why I'm here, and I don't understand, and they'll read the Bible and go, but yeah, I don't get it. So just to know that you can, that there is a process that you can know your identity and lean into that. The second is the enemy will always lie, and will lie all day, every day, for the rest of your life. And that's his goal. And we can learn how to detect a lie, even if, yeah, we can learn how to. So you have an identity that's valuable and important. It can be discovered. The second is the enemy is a liar, always. The enemy always lies. And the third is you can choose to believe what is true. You can choose to believe what is true, even if it doesn't feel true. So there's going to be things that you go, I bet I've always felt this way, or this feels true about me. I feel stupid. I feel inadequate. I feel wrong. I feel unworthy. I feel incompetent is probably one that most people in any kind of ministry struggle with. I feel incompetent, and those are feelings. And what I love to do is walk people into that process of, what are you competent, and can you understand your competence, and then accept that there's certain places where you're not going to be competent, and that's okay. And to be able to say, I don't know about that, but I can go find somebody who does, or I'll go look it up for you. And I had to learn that as a professional. I don't know everything. I can't help everybody. I will do my best to help who I can. And then I'll try to either find someone who can, or I'll look it up for you, and I'll do some research for you. And so really learning how to say it's okay. I know what I know, and I have the message that God's given me for humanity, regardless of whether it's formal ministry, parachurch ministry, or business. There is something that God has given you to do. And when you do that one thing, it's okay to say, I can't do it all, and I don't know how to do it all, and I'm going to get help for the things that I don't know how to. There should be no shame in that, ever. Never any shame. So those three things: you have an identity, who you are is important, valuable to God, innately valuable. The second is the enemy will always lie. And the third is you can choose to believe what is true, even if it doesn't feel true. And so the last story that I always tell before I end any type of speaking engagement is the story about the day that God made you. And I have this on a separate YouTube video that you can watch. It doesn't have anything on it. It's just me telling the story. And so I'm going to tell you the story about the day that God made you. So there was this day that the God that made this beautiful background stopped everything he was doing. And he says, I'm going to make a new person. And he thought about you. And he took the cells of your body and he swirled them in his hand. And he thought about the color of your eyes, and the color of your hair, and the shape of your toes. And he was excited. He goes, angels, check it out. I'm making a new person. And they're like, wow, God, you've never made anything like that before. He said, no, this one's new. And the way they see the world and respond to the world is going to be different than anything I've ever made before. And he thought about your favorite color and your favorite animal and your favorite food. And he says, this is good. He says, I love you. I love you so much. Everything about you matters to me. The things that bring you happiness and joy, but also the things that bring you sorrow and pain, it all matters to me. And it's my hope for you, as it is for everyone, that when I put you in the world, that you have two parents that tell you every day how much you matter to me, every day. Now, some parents, they'll do their job really well, and other parents not so much. And then some parents aren't around, and then sometimes bad people do bad things to good kids. And then the world's going to come along and say, you know what, you don't look right. You don't sound right. You don't live here. You don't know these people. You don't have this education. You don't. And every day, thousands of messages will bombard you and make you feel like you're not worthy or good enough. And it might get really hard for you to hear my voice and to remember how much you matter to me. But I want you to know that every moment of every day, I'm right by your side. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, I will never abandon you. And I also have all these angels as well that can come and minister to you. All you have to do is call on me. I'll be right there. And I also want you to know that I'll never be disappointed in you. Now, I might be disappointed in what you think about, what you say, what you do, but I will never be disappointed in who you are, because you are exactly the way I created you to be, and I am your biggest cheerleader. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again someday and welcoming you home and giving you a great big hug. And I hope you remember that every day for the rest of your life. So I hope that that somewhere speaks to you, to the reality of how God sees you and how much you matter to him and how much he loves you and how much he poured life into you and he poured a message into you, and that he has a desire to see that message sent out and watching you and your life flourish. I hope that that helps you understand a little bit more about why I do what I do and help you get engaged as well with each other, and to know that I'm here to be a support and to be an encourager and to walk with you in any way that you need me to. And that's why I said I'd be happy to pray for your needs, and you can contact me anytime. And I hope that we'll learn how to engage well and be the most emotionally mature Christians out there to spread the word of God with a powerful message of hope and love and transformation. I love you guys, and I love God, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you for listening.